I was unaware of my own injuries. I knew I was in pain. I knew I was struggling to breathe, but what I didn't realize is both of my legs had been crushed. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. My rib cage had been damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My back had been damaged. 2 of the vertebrae had been cracked. Thankfully, it didn't damage the spinal column, so I still have movement. And then my shoulder, my arm had almost been torn out. The whole rotator cuff and everything was torn out. And then the seatbelt had cut through me and ruptured all my insides. I was a mess.
Wow.
I wasn't aware of that. All I knew is my son's crying. I've got to get to him. And I couldn't get to him.
The 2 biggest questions from my perspective in life: why are we here and what happens after we die? Well, we examine near-death experiencers' accounts from all over the world, men and women, and their fascinating trips across the veil. We appreciate you joining us here on the channel, and don't forget, when you're done, if you wouldn't mind, to like, share, and subscribe, and leave us your comments.
All right, we welcome you to our latest podcast here on the Near Death Network on YouTube. We examine, if you haven't been with us before, the remarkable near-death experience stories of experiencers, but we also talk to clinicians, academicians. We try to get you some salient points that you can leave with after these interviews to interject into your lives to make them more joyous and navigable. And my guest today is a longtime friend, Jeff Olsen, who joins us from his office. Jeff, it's great to see you. First of all, let's get acquainted with who you were, how you grew up. I know your story. We've known each other for years, but you were raised in a family of boys, and it was pretty rough and tumble, huh?
It was. And Mark, it's so good to see you, and it's so good to be with you. Thank you for having me. And I grew up, my parents split up when I was young. They divorced. I was with my mother through my young years, and they were fantastic co-parenters. But as I grew older, I ended up on the farm, up on the ranch with my dad and my 2 brothers. So it was all men, and it was rough and tumble. And we were milking cows and had beef cows and horses and all that goes with it. And we did everything from football to rodeo to all the rough and tumble stuff. It was quite an upbringing.
And so you went on to college at Utah State?
Yes, I went to Utah State. I played football up there, and I'm still an Aggie through and through, true blue.
And then you meet Tamara. So Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was, believe it or not, I was actually quite shy. I mean, socially, I was the guy that would sit in the corner or stand in the back, and, I would observe what was going on. And when I met Tamara, she walked in the room, and it was like a lightning bolt hit me. I was just like, wow. And it was beyond love at first sight. There was a knowing. It was a knowing. It's like, there she is. There's your future wife. And I didn't even know her name. I mean, it was really profound. And the miracle is probably that I introduced myself and began talking to her, and we became friends. And then we had a relationship and a courtship, and we eventually married. But wow, I knew. I mean, and I was this shy kid playing football, getting through school, and she walked in, and that was kind of, in some ways, this thing that I could never put my finger on, this thing that I felt there's something bigger than I am. And I grew up in a conservative Christian home. However, I would go out at night on the farm and look at the stars and just think there's something so much bigger. And when Tamara walked in the room, I think it was a wink about something so much bigger.
So a soul connection.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So then in later days, you are married, you have the boys, you have Spencer and Griffin, you go down in 1997 to visit her parents. It was Easter weekend, correct?
Yeah, Easter weekend. And we were very close to her family. I mean, we'd had our 2 sons, and we were going down to visit her parents, but specifically her grandparents. Her grandfather had become ill. He had dementia or Alzheimer's. They said he may not even remember you guys. However, when we came, it was like a normal visit. He was in a care center, but he remembered us. He loved playing with the children, which would have been his great grandchildren. And we had a beautiful visit. It was a beautiful Easter weekend, and there was things about that I'll always remember. I mean, the kids, and we'd gone and we'd made the Easter eggs and put them out in the garden, and the kids got up and were searching for the Easter eggs, and Griffin was just learning to walk and just starting to talk. And
how old was he, Jeff?
He was 14 months.
Okay.
So he was just a baby. I mean, he was just over a year old, but he was, they began to develop their personality, and he was going after these colored eggs, and he'd bring them up to me. He'd take a few steps, he'd fall down, he'd crawl, and the eggs, the eggs there. But he would bring it to me, and he would say, "Dad, ball." He thought it was a ball, and I'll remember those sweet things. But it was a beautiful weekend, beautiful visit, and it was on the Monday morning when we were getting ready to come back home, Monday after Easter, that we had the accident, and that was the near-death experience based on this horrible accident we had.
Well, before you get to the accident, talk about the little interlude that Tamara had when she prompted you to stop and then run back and
Mark,
say goodbye to her parents.
I'm so glad you brought that up. We had said goodbye. We had hugged everybody, and I'd put the luggage in the car, and I'd buckled the kids in their car seats, and we were just getting ready to pull away. In fact, I'd put the car in drive. I was just pulling away from the curb, and Tamara said, "Stop, wait." And I thought she had forgotten something. I thought, oh, she's left her handbag in the kitchen or something.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped the car. And she looked at me and she said, "I just want to say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time." And I'll admit, in that moment, I thought, oh, come on, we've said goodbye.
You got to get out of here.
Get on the road. But I stopped the car, and I watched as she got out, and she ran up to them. And I simply noticed how she embraced them, she hugged them, and she kissed them. And I watched that. And, then she joyfully came back to the car and jumped in and buckled up. But here's the significance of that moment. She must have got a feeling. She must have got a whisper. There must have been an intuition or an inspiration. Stop, wait, I want to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time. And I'm not implying that she knew what would happen. If either of us would have known what had happened, we'd have parked the car, stopped it, sat on the lawn, and, and waited. Right. But as the day played out, that was the last goodbye. And so in hindsight, it's very, it's significant. It's like she had a feeling, she acted upon it, and she went and hugged him and kissed him. And I think we all get those whispers if we're just open to it, if we're just willing to listen.
Yeah, there are signs, in you and the panel that we've convened. We talked about signs extensively, and I know Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll and rainbows is his big sign now from his deceased daughter. You're right. I don't think we don't really give them merit because we say, oh, no, that couldn't happen. That's not right. I'm just imagining. I want it to happen, but we'll get back to that in a later date. But so you get on the road, you're a little harried by your own admission to get back up there. And then what happens right prior to the accident?
Yeah, I was hustling. I thought I'm going to lose a day of work. There's a lot of things happening. I had set the car on cruise control at 75 miles per hour. That was as fast as I could legally go. And I had a moment, perhaps. I mean, I glanced in my rearview mirror just to see what traffic was doing as I'm racing up the interstate. And in that glance, in that moment, I saw Griffin, my youngest son, in his car seat. and in my mind, I was thinking about all the things that had to be done and all the stuff that I would be behind on, and I've got to call this guy. And yet when I glanced and saw him, all of a sudden, all that turmoil in my head just kind of sunk to this calmness in my heart. And I thought, wow, there he is. I mean, he was our miracle boy. We were told we may not have more children after Spencer. There was complications, but there he was. And he was sleeping. I noticed he was sound asleep, but in that moment, even in that glance, I noticed details. I'm like, wow, look how long his eyelashes are. What a beautiful kid. And that it was that, and it was in a moment. But then I heard Spencer playing with little Star Wars action figures behind me, making all the joyful noise of a little boy in a lightsaber battle. And then I also just glanced over at Tamara, and she had reclined her seat, and she was sound asleep, but she was still holding on to my hand. And there was this absolute moment of gratitude, like, wow, look what I'm surrounded by. How do I begin to process this? And it was a moment, it was a glance. And then, of course, my attention was back on the road. And again, I might not have even remembered that feeling or that moment as significant had the day not played out, because it was probably about an hour, hour and a half after that. And there was reports of crosswinds. There was, reports of a pickup truck that was driving erratically on the road. I know it was windy. I do remember that. I don't recall a pickup. The hardest part of the story, Mark, is I believe I may have dozed off at the wheel. I feel what happened is I dozed off for just a minute, and I had swerved to the right, and then I overcorrected to the left. And in doing so, I lost control of the car. And then the car began to roll, not off the road, but down the road, 75 miles an hour on that hard concrete. And it was a high speed single car crash. And I blacked out, for the actual rolling. I knew we were crashing, but I was not aware that reports said the car may have rolled 6 or 8 times.
Wow.
I blacked out for that. But when the car came to a stop, I was fully conscious and aware that we had wrecked. And the first thing I was aware of was Spencer, my 7-year-old, crying hysterically in the back seat. And my initial reaction is, I've got to get to my son. I've got to get to my boy. And that's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned either to the floorboard or the seat. I couldn't tell, that there was the broken glass. It was a moment of panic, absolute panic. And I was unaware of my own injuries. I knew I was in pain. I knew I was struggling to breathe. But what I didn't realize is both of my legs had been crushed. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. My rib cage had been damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My back had been damaged. 2 of the vertebrae had been cracked. Thankfully, it didn't damage the spinal column, so I still have movement. And then my shoulder, my arm had almost been torn out. The whole rotator cuff and everything was torn out. And then the seatbelt had cut through me and ruptured all my insides. I was a mess.
Wow.
I wasn't aware of that. All I knew is my son's crying. I've got to get to him. And I couldn't get to him. But then the reality hit that no one else was crying. And I became acutely aware, and I won't go into what I saw or what I knew, but I knew that both Tamara and Griffin were gone. I knew they had passed, and they were killed instantly in the accident. And that's the deepest, darkest place a man could be. I mean, here I am pinned. I'm struggling to breathe. I've got a hysterical 7-year-old. Half the family is deceased, and I knew it, and I was driving the car. I mean, the guilt, the regret, it was absolute terror.
Is that when you left and went above the scene?
Yeah, it was in that darkness. And I don't mean to share that to be morbid or graphic, but it was a horrible, horrible scene. And I recall saying to Spencer, my 7-year-old, I recall saying, "It's going to be okay, son." And I knew this is not okay. I mean, it's not okay. And that's when the lights went out, so to speak. But in that darkness, I felt light come. I mean, light literally came to me. It's like light came and surrounded me. It's like I was being comforted by this tangible light. And then, yes, it felt as if I was rising above the accident scene. And suddenly I could breathe. There was no pain. And I was a little bit confused, like, well, how could I possibly be okay?
Right.
And this light, which, you know, that it felt, it's very difficult to explain. It felt like a holding bubble of light. And yet, as I came to terms with, wow, I can breathe and I'm not hurting and what's going on, suddenly Tamara, who I knew was deceased at the scene, she was there in that light with me. And she was very much alive. She was beautiful. She was gorgeous. There was no injuries. It was her, it was me. And we began to communicate. She kept saying, "Jeff, you can't stay. You can't stay. You've got to go back. You've got to go back." And we had a conversation about if I stayed with her, Spencer would be orphaned. I knew Griffin had passed, but he was not a part of this interaction. It was just she and I.
Mm-hmm.
And we made an agreement. For whatever reason, she could not come back. But even the extent of my injuries, and I know her, and I don't want to be morbid. What took her life was severe head trauma, and I was aware of that at the scene.
But she looked perfect when you saw her.
Yes, in this encounter, she was perfect, but she couldn't come back. Right. However, I could, and that was the agreement, is you go back. We're not going to orphan that little boy. You go back and raise our son. And we made a choice. And
did you have any trepidation about going back at all?
Oh, absolutely. And yet you can see how I'm torn. I mean, here I am. Oh, I'm out of pain. And there you are. You're very much alive and gorgeous. And the woman I loved more than life is right here. And I have a little boy in the backseat of that car. And so, yeah, lots of trepidation. It was a major choice. Mm-hmm. Do I stay or do I go back? And of course, Tamara was emphatic. And I know it sounds odd, but she was putting her hands on my chest saying, "You've got to go, you've got to go." And then she would pull me closer, you know. I mean, it felt like a very physical interaction. And yet it was beyond physical. I could literally taste her tears. It was emotional.
Wow.
And I was, oddly enough, comforting her. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And then knowing that it's not okay. Same with Spencer.
Right.
But making that choice. Okay, I'm going back. And that was the most profound goodbye I ever said.
Do you think, and I've never asked you this, but do you think the contract was in place before you incarnated? Because many people say that we do we go over the outline of our lives, we agree to it, we sign the contract, but we still have sovereignty, right? We can go right or we can go left and make our own decisions. Was that the sense that you got?
You know, not in that moment, but my soul knew. I mean, there was a choice, yes, but my soul knew I'm going back. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I have a younger brother who I'm very close to. And after they had extricated me or my body from the car and flighted me into the nearest trauma center, he was the one of the family members that was notified, and he raced to the hospital. And he was devastated. I mean, here was his older brother that I you know, for all intents and purposes, I was not going to make it. He was informed that Tamara and Griffin had passed. He was very close to Tamara. They'd been friends in college. And anyway, he was devastated, emotionally devastated. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he shared this experience where he was at the hospital. And I was unrecognizable. I mean, he said my body looked like somebody had taken a baseball bat to every inch of it. And he said, you were so swollen, you looked like the Michelin Man.
Wow.
But he found an empty room and fell to the ground against a chair. Just you can imagine the family feelings of this. And he said he had an insight, a memory that, yeah, we had all agreed to this. We had all agreed to this. This was part of our journey. And he knew I was going to live. He knew I was going to lose my leg. In fact, he thought maybe both legs. But he intuitively knew. He had a knowing that there was a soul contract here. This was a soul group. We had all come together, and that, yeah, this was all part of the plan, as devastating and horrific as it might be. And it wasn't until later that those insights came to me personally, and we can talk about that. But yeah, I believe that there are no accidents.
Yeah.
In fact, it's beyond a belief.
But you're here now too, so you're in the third dimension, so it's very difficult. We're all, we still have challenges, even though you have that knowing at your core, especially based on your remarkable experience. It's still, you think, man, this third dimension, it's a piece of work. It gives you a workout, no matter, even if you know, right? You know in your heart of hearts, this is all, my life story. I'm living it out.
Right.
It's still challenging, but that's part of the story, right? That's the contrast, that when you're there on the other side of the veil, encompassed by the arms of God, who later would tell you that there are no mistakes. It's all in divine order. You didn't do anything wrong. Everything you did was fine. You're loved beyond measure. Even though that's the truth, we still have to go through the motions here.
We do. And I feel like, and this is, I'll use a sports analogy. You'll get this, Mark, you and I, because, I feel our souls are eternal. And yeah, we were in some other realm and we were going to have this experience. I think it was kind of like sitting in the locker room, having a whiteboard discussion about how this play was going to look. This guy's going to block here and here. And, it's going to be a touchdown every time if you're on offense, or you're going to stop it at the line of scrimmage if you're on defense. But you have no idea, how big that 280-pound guard is, and how fast a 4.4 40 is. I mean, we had a life plan spread out before us, and we're like, oh, that looks good. It was a whiteboard discussion.
Right.
But we had no idea what it would feel like in the body, in the third dimension, with a veil of forgetful. We don't remember that.
Right. The slate was wiped clean.
Process. Yeah. If we remembered it, we couldn't play the game, right? It's like,
well, yeah. And, a lot of the younger influencers like Betty Guadagno, who's just remarkable. She articulates, it's not like a simulation to them. It's more like a video game, right? We're in the matrix, and, we're just components of the overall overarching plan for this incarnation, even if it's simultaneous. And that's getting a little bit down the weeds and esoteric, that we might have multiple dimensional realities going on at the same time. But we're here now. So let's go fast forward. You go to the first hospital, you get airlifted out of there because they don't have the resources to treat you. You come into the next hospital, and this is a remarkable account. To me, it's almost analogous to the life review without your specific incidences being replayed, because you had the ability to know these people's most deep, not secrets, but thoughts, how they conveyed themselves as an individual soul. Tell people about that.
Yeah. So I say goodbye to Tamara, and it's like, whoosh, suddenly I find myself moving about a very busy level 1 trauma center. And Mark, you outlined it. I mean, in the third dimension, people had come to the scene, and gosh, I still remain friends with some of the people that were the first on the scene of the accident. They did rush me to a local hospital. They couldn't care for me. I had to be life flighted. I was unaware of any of that. I knew I'd crashed the car, Half the family had passed. I had said goodbye to Tamara. And now I'm moving through this busy level 1 trauma center. I won't say I was walking through it. I won't say I would wander. I was moving through it, but I was so aware. There was a profound awareness of everyone and everything around me. I was aware of the doctors, the nurses, the other patients, the families of the other patients. I was connected to all of it. I call it a oneness. And like you said, I mean, everyone I saw, I knew them. I knew them perfectly. I knew everything about them. I knew their love, their hate, their life, their motivation, their joy, their bliss, their challenges, as if it were a part of me. This oneness, that I was connected to all of it. For instance, a nurse passes by, completely unaware of me, and in that instant, I feel and know her life. I am very much aware of the abuse she received as a child. I mean, devastating stuff. But in that same moment, I see her magnificence. I'm like, wow, look at her here, serving, helping, healing in a hospital. And it was true of everyone I saw. There was knowledge, there was information, but there was no judgment. I was seeing the beauty of these souls, the magnificence of these souls, with nothing but love.
Well, I think Anita Moorjani has a great metaphor for that in Dying to Be Me. Is she talks about a resplendent tapestry in, let's say you go to a museum and you're like 3 inches away from it and you see the little bit of the tapestry and you witness, it looks all right. There's a lot of color in there. It seems like it's an intricate weave. But if you take 20 steps back, you see that every thread is dependent on the next thread and that we are all interconnected, and that's how we are. And we don't have that ability unless you have an extraordinary experience like this, or if we're circumspect to look at that as a concept to understand how tied we are to one another and how our actions influence others.
Yeah. Yeah. And the profound thing in this experience was there was no judgment. Judgment and comparisons just went out the window. There was this overwhelming love and connection. And it changed me. It changed me.
So you're in the hospital for how long? 6 months?
Almost 6 months.
Yeah.
I had 18 surgeries in all, to put me back together. And I learned a lot there. I mean, just the care I was given, the way my family and my workmates showed up. I mean, I learned a lot about humanity and the goodness of humanity. I mean, there's so many things where we say, oh gosh, the human race is lost. And there's all kinds of strife and division and wars. And, I know that's all part of the experience. However, at a deeper level, I really saw that people are good. And it's just interesting choices we make. And yet maybe the interesting choices are part of the challenge for the expansion of our soul in this third dimension.
I think that's a great way to put it, because there's always multiple ways to look at one situation. We all see things differently or in common. That's what makes us unique. We are all divine sparks of the infinite presence, consciousness, God, however you want to characterize it. And then you have the impetus and the ability to affect those in your sphere of influence, right? So you telling your story can help those folks. I want to get to you left your body on multiple occasions when you were in the hospital. You had the ability to do that. But tell me about the interaction with Griffin and then your interaction with G.O.D., the big fella.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you for bringing that up too. And that was at the end of my hospital stay, because during the hospital, I was in and out of the body. I was on a lot of morphine. There was a lot of, contributing factors that people might say, well, that's because he had such high levels of morphine or whatever. But the two most profound experiences were at the accident scene when I left and had the conversation with Tamara. And then I was out of ICU. I was out of surgical recovery. I was out of the regular hospital. I was actually in the rehabilitation wing when I had this second profound experience, and I was off the heavy narcotics. I went to bed one night, and they had put the colostomy and everything. I was finally able to sleep on my side so I wouldn't spill my guts out. They had to leave those wounds open for months. I mean, the infections and all that was going on. But I was able to sleep on my side, which is how I naturally sleep. And I had laid so long on my back, I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. I was bald on the back, and my brothers were giving me a bad time about that. And they were so kind. I mean, they were right there. In fact, my younger brother was at the hospital this very night. But I drifted off into a deep sleep. And the strange thing is, I was aware in my sleep, I thought, wow, I'm sleeping very peacefully. Have I really even slept over these months? I've been unconscious. I've certainly gone to sleep, but I'm resting. I'm peaceful. And I was aware of that. So in my sleep, I was aware of my sleeping, but then I felt that light come again. That same light as at the accident, that tangible, healing light. And I had been in such grief. I mean, the physical challenges were one thing, but the emotional challenges of half the family passing. And Griffin, my little son, and I'll share this too, he had been ejected from the car. His car seat had broken up, and yet I was aware of it just haunted me. It haunted me. But here I was in this light, and it was comforting. And the grief seemed to be not abolished or taken away, but I was held in such peace. And again, it felt like I was rising above the hospital bed. But this time the light dispensed. It like went away. It wasn't this holding tank of light like with Tamara. There was this expanse, and I was in the most beautiful place, and I was whole. I had my whole body. I had both feet, both legs, and I began to run. And it was such a physical experience. This is what I find interesting still. I could feel everything as if it were physical. I could feel, in fact, it was beyond physical. I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the intelligence in my calves and thighs as I ran. It was an expansive experience beyond physical. However, I felt it physically, and yet I was out of my body, but I could feel things. And I'm just joyfully thinking, I'm whole. My body is healed. And I was in this most beautiful place. People say heaven, the spirit world, the other side. The only word that comes close to what I was experiencing is I was home. I was home. It felt so welcoming, so familiar, and I'm running joyfully. And then I got the impression, I got the feeling, I got the knowing that I wasn't there to stay. And at that time, there was this like corridor off to my left, and I knew intuitively I'm to go that way. And I did. I began working my way down this corridor. And at the end of the corridor, I could see a crib. Now, Griffin had still been sleeping in a crib, only 14 months old. Now, he was climbing out of it and up to mischief at night, and he was all boy. But I saw this crib, and so I raced to the crib, and I looked in the crib, and there was my little boy. And he was sleeping as beautifully as when I looked in the rearview mirror, and the details were so prominent. And Mark, I mean, it's been 28 years since the accident. I've shared this story hundreds of times. But when I go back to this moment, I mean, there was my son, and I picked him up. And I held him, and I could feel him. And it was so physical. I could feel his body against mine. I could feel his little rib cage expanding with breath. I could feel his breath on my neck. All the senses were there. In fact, I leaned over and I smelled his hair. And I thought, it's him, and he's okay. It's so far from the broken up car seat and what took place in the accident. He was whole. He was perfect. He was healthy. He was well. And I began weeping, holding him, thinking, wow, can this really be? Do I really get to hold him? Do I really get to be with him?
Yeah.
And at that time, there was this presence coming behind me. And I'm so enthralled with my son, but I can feel this overwhelming, overpowering, cosmic, wise presence. And as you spelled out, I thought, that's God. And then the guilt started to come up. I'm like, well, here I am holding my little boy, and he's here because I dozed off or overcorrected or screwed up driving the car. I cut his life short, and the presence is coming closer and closer. And I'm thinking, I am in so much trouble here. I have failed the test of life. As a father, he's here because I crashed the car. And I'm in this, and the presence comes right behind me, and I don't dare turn around. And I had this thought, I hope I can be forgiven somehow. And in that thought, and this almost felt physical too, it's like these divine arms just wrapped around and held me and my little boy. And that's when the download came, the lid just came off, and all this peace and truth and love came flowing into my entire being. And I'm with my son, and I'm in the arms of God, and I have communicated to me, there's nothing to forgive. It's all in divine order. Now here I am in this, and it's beautiful, but I'm still arguing with God. I'm like, oh, how can that be? It's not in divine order. I crashed the car, half the family's gone, I'm maimed for life. And this is when I begin to see my life, and I'm like, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And what's being communicated to me is, what did you learn? It was such unconditional love. What did you learn?
So this is your life review then?
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing the divorce. I'm seeing my brothers. I'm seeing things and choices I made. I'm judging it. I'm seeing things and thinking, well, that was wrong. And I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway. And even in the arms of God, it was communicated, that's your judgment of it, not ours. We love you. You are as precious and known and divine and perfect as the little boy you hold. And it was a very personal experience, but I knew it rippled out to every living being. This love was so intense and so unconditional, and I'm putting judgments on my life, saying I've failed the test. And God said, oh, my dear boy, life is not a test. It's a gift. All of this was for your expansion. And I'm like, it hurts so bad, and yet there was all this love. And it felt as if the entire universe was there in my support or observing my silly little life. And yet there was so much love that just rippled out. And I had a bit of a tutoring on choice, because I was still asking the why questions. Well, why? How? And and God said to me, well, you can be mad the rest of your life at God, at the universe, at everything, because this was allowed to happen, because half the family passed and you crashed the car, and that's a choice. Or you can be mad at yourself. You can beat yourself up for the rest of your life because you were driving. That's a choice. But I was given this third choice. It was presented, it was intellect, it was an idea. It's like, or you can give your son to me. You can trust and hand him over and realize that it's all in divine order. And that would be an exercise of your will. Now, this was my will. Gosh, I grew up, it's your will be done. I've taught that since I was a little boy. And as I had that thought, it was communicated to me, my will is your will. That's how much you're loved. My will is that you have free will, that you get to choose.
Right.
You can choose to hand your son over, and then it won't feel like he was, taken away. And your wife too. In this moment, you can choose trust and let go. And I did. In all that love and all that beauty, I kissed my little boy and I handed him over. And then boom, I'm back in the hospital bed, back in this broken body, back to all the injuries, and yet with a different insight. And it's not that I didn't continue to grieve. I don't want anyone to think I had this horrible accident and then I had these profound experiences and then I was okay. No.
Right.
No, I had a horrible accident. I had profound experiences and I grieved like any other man grieves.
And you've told me on multiple occasions, and this is very commonplace for experiencers, your reintegration process didn't happen overnight. It's not like, wow, I was in heaven, everything's cool, I talked to God, I'm forgiven rather for everything. There are no mistakes, but you have this reintegration. Then you begin to come forward. You talk about your story. Spencer's fine. You get remarried. You add 2 sons to your family. But now fast forward to what you're going through personally now. Again, your world is being turned upside down in a way. But if you look at it from the macro with your interaction with God, it's all ordained and there are no mistakes. But when you're here on the third dimension, it's a hell of a thing to negotiate, isn't it?
It really is. And yes, all of that. I was in a wheelchair. I learned to walk. I was taking care of Spencer. I was keeping my word and raising my son. I fell in love again. Tanya came into my life, and she is and was a gift. I learned so much. And it was interesting because Tamara never spiritually, she'd still communicate. And she had told me, and I recorded it in the book. This is all in knowing. In the book, I had said, she said, and it was a verbatim, she said, she will teach you unconditional love. And I thought, well, of course I love her unconditionally. And yet the hard part of the integration too was having been held in those divine arms and then coming back. It's like, where's all the love? Where's all that love I felt? Where's all that acceptance? Where's all that profound, unconditional, divine love? I don't see it here. And, it's like, and there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. Why don't I go rob the bank? Right. The integration took almost a decade. And yes, I came forward, I shared the story, and Tanya and I adopted 2 boys who are my joy. My children are my joy. And I've even got an angelic one. Griffin is still my guardian angel. And then, in recent years now, well, that marriage and relationship ended. And it was devastating. And this might be a crazy thing to say, I think divorce is more difficult than death.
Wow.
I mean, in death, I knew Tamara loved me. I mean, she passed away holding my hand. And based on the experience, I knew where she was. This wasn't theology. I had experienced it. And there was also the finality that she's not coming back. She has passed on, right?
Right.
And in divorce, I don't love you anymore, or I love you differently, or I'm moving on to something else. And I've learned a lot. And yet at this point, I can say with pure conviction that it has expanded my soul. It has given me a greater capacity for empathy. It's given me a greater capacity to love, and it's all been part of my journey. I mean, these things that happen that we have so much judgment about, they may be the greatest gifts we're ever given. And I know that's a crazy thing to say, but I've grown more in pain and in challenge than I have in joy and bliss. We're here to experience them both. I'm not making one more than the other, but we came for the whole experience and in the arms of the divine. When God's saying it's all in divine order, and I love you, you're my boy or girl, or whatever. I mean, again, It was so personal, but I know it expands out to every living soul, and that's why we came. To experience the darkest dark and the lightest light and the deepest grief and the highest bliss, and that is a gift. What was whispered to me, that life is not a test, it's a gift for the expansion of our soul. And we don't die. It's not over when we take our last breath and move on. We literally transform. And I think even in that, we have a choice. Well, what do you want to do now? What do you want to do now? There's that much love.
Well, let's put a button on this because, you and I have known each other for several years. We were working on a project that got derailed by COVID to do a television series. I still would like to have that happen at some point. And with you as the host, I think you'd be remarkable.
You're more looking than I am, Mark. You be the host.
No, not me. I'll be the questioner. But for people, even if the statistics are borne out by IANS, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies, that 4 to 15% of the world's population will have a near-death or spiritually transformative experience, that's still not the entire world, right? Most of us will not have those experiences. So what can you pass on based on what you've been through in kind of a primer for people who are watching this and interested, kind of nuggets that they can incorporate into their daily lives to make them more joyous?
Wow. Oh, you're good, Mark. Those are good questions. I mean, number one, we may not get tomorrow. Things can change so drastically, so quickly. So live in today. Live in this moment. Tell the people you love them. Write that letter, make that phone call, send that text. Do that. Also, that life is a choice. We have choices moment to moment to moment, and it certainly won't feel like we're choosing what's happening, but we can always choose how we respond to it. And based on the unconditional love I've felt, if I could respond as love would respond, that's what I ask myself. What would love do? And, love can do a lot of things. Love is kind and long-suffering and patient. And sometimes, like even raising boys, sometimes love kicks them in the butt and says, okay, let's man up and make the, love is a loaded word, but what would love do? And also,
don't you feel like, sorry, Jeff, but don't you feel like you have to set that up in your mind before you head out the door in the day? A good friend of yours and who's become a good friend of mine, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, says he lays his day out laying in bed at the beginning of the day and says, whatever comes across my plate or my vision, that I'm going to react in this fashion. So that way we're not blindsided, because we act on the truth, we react to error. Somebody cuts us off, we flip them off, we start a chain reaction.
Yeah.
But if you're mindful, I think you were talking about this, like be circumspect and incorporate love as the primary thought that I'm going to bring forth today, then more often than not, you'll probably be successful.
Yeah, I think it is a choice. It's like, okay, how do I, what would love do? And be conscious and aware about it, and then respond in such a way that you're at peace. I've said things and thought, oh, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Oh, why did I react that way? And that can help alleviate those things in our life that we have to second guess. What would love do? And then the choice, just that it is a choice. And we can choose joy, or we can choose fear, or we can choose love. There's an old story about two wolves. There was an old sage, and he was ready to pass himself, and his grandson came to him, and he said to his grandson, there are two wolves within me, and they're constantly at war. They're constantly fighting. One is the wolf of fear. And he's angry, and he's resentful, and he's fearful, and he's ready to fight. The other is the wolf of love, who is kind and patient and generous and conscious. And the grandson said to the old sage, well, which wolf will win? And the old sage said, the one that I feed. the one that I feed. So it's a choice. There's always a choice. And I think that is the cosmic law of the universe is we have a choice. We get to choose. And that's a lot of things. But
Absolutely.
choice, love, and doing those things that bring our highest good and the highest good of everybody together.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us, and we'll keep us apprised of your story as it moves on, and we'll revisit it as we move on. And I think it takes a village. It takes all of us to help elevate the consciousness of the planet. And I think, like you mentioned, if you choose love, if you lead with love and gratitude's a huge component too. I mean, you're a good example of that. Yeah, you lost your leg, you had all these surgeries, but you still have your son. You have that remarkable relationship with Tamara that helped foster your relationship with God and brought you closer to divinity, and to be able to extend that out to everybody you meet. So we love you, buddy. Thanks for taking the time today, and we'll talk soon.
Love you too. Thank you. We'll see you soon.